Welcome to the Peer Review Podcast, cultivating creativity and fulfillment in academia.
I'm Sarah Bunin-Benor.
And I'm Mira Sukharov.
In each episode, we interview fellow scholars, coaches, and experts on what makes for a good academic life.
Today, our guest is Peter Anderson.
Peter is a leadership coach with over 20 years of experience in higher education. He specializes in strategies for wise-minded leadership through emotional intelligence. Peter has a firm called Inner Citadel Consulting, and he offers individual coaching and group workshops, including about mindfulness. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks, both. It's great to be here with you.
So, Peter, you were a professor of classics. You attained the rank of full professor, and then you experienced serious burnout, and then you retrained as an executive coach. Can you tell us about that transition and about your career up until that point?
Sure. Yeah. So the career is less interesting than the burnout and transition, maybe. But yeah, I was in the trenches at a large regional comprehensive in the United States, doing a lot of work teaching, national service in the discipline, becoming very well known at the end of my career for digital humanities projects and for second language pedagogy around Greek and Latin, teaching historical languages. I was also involved with International Baccalaureate as chief examiner for classical languages, so doing a lot of travel to Europe to work with teams there and managing a global team, chairing my department, and through just a series of things within the department became what I now call a load-bearing member of a team, and that just became too much. And so the burnout trajectory was pretty clear. And I probably would have gone into full burnout, but my spouse was recruited out of state, and so we had an opportunity to move and reset. And what I did is what most academics do when they reach a crisis point like that. I took a leave because, of course, I didn't want to give up my tenured position and the security that offered. Didn't want to give up the vision for my career that I built that far. But during that academic leave, it very quickly became clear to me that I had created a set of very unhealthy work habits and relationship to work, and that work was no longer giving me the satisfaction that I needed. And so I retrained for executive coaching. The reason I retrained was that I had seen in Michigan at Grand Valley State was known for being entrepreneurial or a bunch of pirates, depending on who you're talking to. And so my instinct for creating new things and my relative lack of fear around moving into places where I didn't really know much because I knew that I could create knowledge sort of served me well. So that transition took probably about a year, at which point I opened my business.
Wow. Okay. Tell us about those deficiencies in academia that you identified that made you want to make this transition.
Well, yeah, sure. So, and as it turns out, it's not only in academia, it's in any industry where you have people with high levels of technical knowledge and competence who are promoted up their vertical to manage people like them. Turns out it's a common story. So I work across industries like that. I think one of the things that happens is that people become competent in their area. So in their department, in their lab. And at a certain point, they're offered a chance to serve their department or lab or team as a leader within that space. If it turns out that they're good at that, then they're usually promoted or offered the next level of leadership. And most complex organizations have a process for identifying succession, identifying emerging leaders, and giving them the competencies that they need for the next position. And I think higher ed, because of the tension that exists between faculty professionals who become leaders and their faculty mission, their perceived faculty mission, I think the opportunities to give people new competencies are often missed. It's not true across the board. And of course, some organizations, universities do send people for trainings, and I recognize all of that. But by and large, I think people get those trainings after they've gotten into the new position. And it's not that that's too late, it's just not very fair. So my goal has always been to present people with opportunity to achieve new competencies before they need them. And in other industries, that's a truism, right? So the skills that got you here aren't going to get you there. And so people are, I think, a little bit more aware of it. And really effective organizations have those systems in place to identify, train, and move people through succession planning.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So tell us about your clients. Who are your clients and what kind of problems have they had?
Yeah, so the faculty who are not in administration, most of the faculty I work with are mid-career faculty. So they are people who have reached a point in their career where they're starting to need to make choices. Academia has a very structured process, right? We have a path that's outlined for us from the beginning of graduate education, right? There's always the next thing to do. There's always the next rank to attain. We have lots of control within that for how we work, but really those goalposts are set for us. And even as faculty transition into leadership roles, those goalposts are set. But for mid-career faculty, we often have achieved most of the goalposts that were identified for us or that we sort of constructed our own value set or goals around. And then you're kind of left there. You attain the rank of full professor. Well, what do I do now? You complete that series of book projects that you'd had planned for a while. Well, what do I do now? You step back from a lot of service. Well, what do I do now? Those are the faculty clients that I work with the most out of the faculty sphere.
Okay, so tell us about the concerns that they come to you with.
Yeah, some of them are existential, like I don't know what to do now, or I'm sick of what I've been doing, or I want to recreate myself, or I seem to have reached the end of the goalposts that the academic career path has set for me. I wonder what I should do now. So I even had one client say, well, it seemed like the logical thing was to go into administration. It's like, well, okay, but yeah, they're sort of a range of paths. That's one thing. Other things I would call more pragmatic, which is how do I balance competing demands around my time? How do I recover from burnout, or how do I stop the process of burnout? How do I deal with chronic stress? How do I move projects forward when I'm losing steam or I'm losing enthusiasm? All the kinds of things that your listeners and probably you too have encountered yourselves.
Just a couple times where we've circled around this term burnout, and it's something I've been wondering about a lot lately myself. And I mentioned it to someone. I mentioned it to my therapist, my actual psychotherapist. And at first she said, no, burnout is like nurses when they're working 16 hours and they're underpaid and worked off their feet, and that's not you. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, that's not me. And I'm thinking my burnout is more internal. It's more sense of purpose, sense of self. So tell me about you, the burnout you're seeing in your clients, and even you, because you sounded like you were at the top of your game. I mean, you could have stepped away from some of the things like being the chief baccalaureate examiner, digital humanities. And so tell us about that, about how to know when it's burnout.
Yeah, well, so I will say I'm not a trained therapist and I am not a doctor.
And my therapist is not an academic. Well, she actually is an academic, but she's not a practicing academic. So exactly, we're all not always speaking the same language with each other. So from your vantage point, how do you see it?
So there is a clinical definition of burnout, and it often overlaps with what I'll talk about. But what I was experiencing and what my clients tend to experience fall into physical things and affective things, so emotional things. So the physical things are that fatigue that you just cannot beat. In chronic stress and in clinical burnout, those manifest in specific organ systems and chronic fatigue and all of that stuff. And I don't talk about that. The other side is the affective side. Right. And so what I experience and what my clients experience are the kinds of things that you mentioned, Mira, like a loss of joy, right? very easy to get angry, very easy to be reactive, sort of that your nervous system is constantly primed to respond to threat, perceived or otherwise, or even existential threat. The idea that you're just not getting anywhere, right? Or that you've lost your sense of what brought you into academia. The kinds of disengagement you sometimes see from people in this space where they kind of stop caring about how they're approaching their students, how they're approaching their research, or they're caring a lot and they just can't seem to balance their lives. So those are the things I'm talking about as sort of symptoms or signs of burnout. And again, there is a clinical definition of what burnout is, and that's probably what your therapist was talking about. I will say academics have similar kinds of work patterns. We're not dealing with, physical or mental trauma, but we're busy. We have many competing cognitive demands and emotional demands. We have to bounce from task to task that are quite different, teaching to research to meetings and all the rest. So faculty life is complex. It's not as, you know, genuinely stressful as like a trauma hospital ER nurse. But there are stresses, and the human body just can only take so much.
So the human body and the mind, and in your bio, you mentioned dealing with mindfulness, and
Mhm.
you also, there are some things you've written about stoicism. Can you talk a little bit about all of these philosophies and the mind-body connection and how you apply them in your work?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a long time mindfulness practitioner. I've had a meditation practice for about 25 years and studied Tai Chi for about the same amount of time. I also saw the value, which is well researched, in contemplative pedagogies. So bringing practices of mindfulness into the classroom. So in 2006, I think, was the first time that I introduced it in classes and did pretty regularly after that. Stoicism was a field that one of the areas that I worked in. And I found I'm not a Stoic, and most people aren't anymore, but we won't get into that. But I found a lot of the things Stoics said about your value systems, how you express your agency, how you utilize awareness to navigate the world. Those all made sense to me in terms of my mindfulness practice as well. So those come together in sort of more or less specific ways when I'm coaching clients. Sometimes clients respond quite negatively to the idea of mindfulness or meditation. And in fact, I had one client who said, I don't want any of that mindfulness crap. Right. I tried meditation, it doesn't work. I said, okay, fine. We'll just talk about awareness. Like, let's just think about that. And about 6 months later, after the engagement ended, he kind of wrote me an email and said, you're a total jerk. You were actually teaching me mindfulness the whole time. I've enrolled in a meditation class. I said, great, great, good for you. So the core ideas of mindfulness focus around awareness of the present moment without judgment. And I think a lot of people who are trained to use their minds are trained to be judges. And that includes judging the present moment as well as ourselves. And so the key application of mindfulness is on that sort of non-judgment side, right? How do we step away from the thing that's happening right now and achieve a little bit of cognitive or emotional distance to take a look at the problem and find a solution? So that's definitely a key application, and I develop frameworks for clients to use to do that. The other application is understanding that mind-body connection or brain-body connection around neural skills that we can learn, right? So our breath is always available to us, and there's some really fantastic evidence, especially over the last 10 years, on how the brain works and how we can leverage our ability to breathe in specific ways to gain better focus, to calm our nervous systems down, to affect our heart rate variability. All of these things are part of mindfulness traditions and are now studied as part of neuroscience. And so bringing those in addition to things like attention management, how we direct our attention, how we control distraction, all of that stuff is aimed at creating a better work approach Yeah.
Okay, this is great. I also have dabbled in meditation a bit, and I do a lot of breathing. I do deep breaths every morning before I get out of bed, and then try to do some at other times during the day, and then once a week do just a 10-minute meditation in the middle of the day.
Right.
And I would love to incorporate more of that. Do you actually do meditation with your clients in the coaching sessions?
Well, it depends what you mean by meditation. So my stock answer to that would be no. But we do mindfulness. So meditation, when you think about that, is usually a specific practice for a specific amount of time within a tradition, secular or not secular. Mindfulness is, from the way I approach it, and the group that I've trained with and work with, is a set of neural skills that we apply that are science-backed to achieve specific effects. So absolutely do that with clients. It takes 90 seconds of gentle breathing in and out through the nose for your lobes to kind of tune electrical impulses. That helps sort of reset a client in a moment of stress. If a client is very anxious, there are practices around box breathing and controlled breathing that can reduce anxiety by short-circuiting the nervous system, returning the brain to, to a more normal state. These are all things that are well studied in different contexts, dealing with high anxiety moments or whatever. They're really useful in coaching because the point of coaching is to get people into a space where they can look at a problem and design a solution for themselves that's going to work. And it's really hard to do that if your nervous system is totally activated, right? Or if you're feeling under threat. So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Could you do a sample uh, of that with us right now?
sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, so we'll just do that nose breathing. So, why don't you, if you like, you can close your eyes. You don't need to, but if you're going to leave your eyes open, just kind of make your gaze gentle and unfocused somewhere, and then go ahead and adopt a posture that you would call dignified. And then breathe in and out through the nose just a couple of times. You don't need to control the breath. You don't need to time it. Breathe in and out a few times. And then slowly try to be as gentle with that breath as possible. Maybe you can follow the breath in through your nose. You might feel a temperature difference. Follow that breath as far as you can into your nose, down to your lungs, and then gently breathe out. Whenever you find yourself thinking of something else, just return your attention to where the air is entering your nose and breathe out gently. And again, whenever your attention wanders, totally fine. Just breathe in through your nose, noticing that breath. Go ahead and take another couple of breaths, maybe a little bit deeper this time, and then slowly open your eyes again. How does that feel?
Feels really good.
I would
Yeah.
say grounding, definitely grounding.
Are you
Yeah.
noticing anything in your body or?
Yeah, I would say like insofar as I'm aware of my nervous system, you used that term earlier, it has slowed, relaxed. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't have all the neuro languages, but the experience of it is that the nervous system is less activated.
Yeah, that's great. So what we know about that particular kind of breathing practice is you do it for a couple of minutes, you'll actually score higher on cognitive tests and you'll be more accurate and quicker. Just by breathing in and out through your nose. Yeah.
Yeah, that's makes sense. That's an intriguing finding. I wanted to ask, you mentioned that you do mindfulness with your students as far back as 2006. I recently was at a conference in my field and we had a pedagogy panel that I participated in, and we read Barilla's book on mindfulness in
Uh-huh.
pedagogy. And
Yeah.
I loved the book. We had to write critical or critiques, whatever academics do when we try to critically engage with something. And I was like, I love
You,
this book. I love this book.
you
But
judge
the book
something,
was
yeah.
actually very
Yeah.
controversial among some of the peers.
Oh,
So
I'm
tell
sure.
us about what you do in pedagogy with your students with regard to mindfulness.
Sure. So I'll just add a prolegomenon to that, use a nice classics word, which is
We
that,
noticed.
yeah, when I got involved in contemplative pedagogy, it was through the Association for Contemplative Mind in Higher Education, which at the time was based out of Smith College, and it's founded on the same basic principle that contemplative practices can enhance your workspace or your general existence. So I will do a shout out to them because it was I conceived the idea specifically in my Stoics class, but I didn't really have the language or the application model, and so I did a summer institute with the contemplative group out in Smith College that really helped clarify what I was doing. So there are two kinds of classes that I used it in. One was the Stoics class, and as part of the Stoics class, I incorporated the Stoic practice of meditatio or exercitatio, which are two Latin words that mean practice, which is what meditation means. The Stoics tended to reflect on either in anticipation of events or after events on what happened. So a reflective practice. They also did reflection on key terms or phrases that they felt would be preparatory for the shocks of life. And so we know a little bit about this from Seneca and other writers. So in the Stoic class, I wanted the application of the contemplative practice to be grounded in the content. And so what students did in that class, which led to a national award for teaching, is they adopted the practice of meditatio around key phrases that also linked to the content that I was trying to teach. So they did one every week, and that phrase was, thematically connected to the thing they were needed to learn that week. So, and they would also keep a journal on what that phrase meant for them throughout the week as they spent some time with it, because sometimes it would change. So that was a very specific and content-driven application of contemplative pedagogy. But I also used it in language classes because we know that mindfulness affects the affective state, just like we did with you all, and we know that learning is more effective when your affective state is more positive. So students who are stressed, angry, irritated, tired, don't learn as well as students who are grounded, paying attention, and so on. And there are some really good studies around language acquisition with contemplative pedagogy that show that students just learn a lot better. And they test a lot better as well. So there it was not related to content, but it was related to outcome. And so that part took me a little longer because I was so focused on this has to matter for the content. But really, it just, it can matter for the outcome too. And so anybody in any field at any time can apply contemplative pedagogy strategies to help their students learn better and to be less anxious and test better and so on. So
I'm totally going to apply that in the classroom.
yeah, great. I'll
And
send you some titles. Yeah.
can you actually do that mindfulness yourself while you're leading a mindfulness exercise?
Uh, well, it depends. So if it's a short intervention, I usually don't do it myself because my responsibility is to lead people through the experience. So like I didn't close my eyes really. I watched you guys to make sure you were okay, and I kept track on time and stuff like that. Um, but it is a practice. And so if you do a practice a lot, you don't need much to activate it. So even though I'm not technically breathing in and out through my nose because I'm talking and all that stuff, I definitely feel an effect. And being around a bunch of people who are calming down together is actually pretty calming too. So yeah.
So this is amazing. Tell us about how all this relates to the idea of productivity. This is something that we're thinking about a lot. Does productivity come up in your coaching sessions, and how does it relate to mindfulness?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, productivity absolutely does. And it's one of the key things that um, all professionals right now are facing, and actually all workforces. So the CDC, I think it was last year, published their annual report on distraction. And I think the figure they tapped onto it was $650 billion lost in the US workforce every year because of distraction. So does not include absenteeism, all the other kind of indicators of stress, but just straight up distraction. And what it calculates down to, I think, is about 2 to 3 hours of the average person's workday. So the business case for emotional intelligence training and mindfulness training in the workplace is easier to make outside of the academy, partly because of the judging factor, but also because people tend to be more interested in the bottom line, whereas a lot of faculty aren't so interested in the bottom line or haven't been. That's probably going to change. Brains are made to be distracted. That is the brain's purpose, is to keep the body safe and the ego safe, and that happens through distraction. But brains are also really good at focusing, and I think we get about as much dopamine from being distracted as we do from focusing on something. So like the neurochemical reward for focus is very similar to the neurochemical reward for distraction. Our current workplace in academia and the social things that have come along with it, like the supercomputer in our pocket and all of the windows that are open on our screens and all that stuff, are built to distract us. So what I usually say to people is that the ease with which we're distracted, and because of the engineering of the systems around us to distract us to things that other entities want us to be aware of, we have to actively counter that. And so a lot of people start off a conversation by saying, I need some help with time management. And usually we get very quickly to the truth, because most functional adults, and definitely all functional academics, know how to block their calendar. They know how to design a project. What we really suck at is sticking our attention to the thing that we blocked our calendar for. And so usually it's around attention management. And attention is a skill. It's a learned skill. And so mindfulness helps us direct our attention and create longer periods of focus. Mindfulness frameworks and awareness of mindfulness allow us to see how we're being distracted and how we can construct our workplace to distract us, right? Or at least don't stop our workplace from distracting us. So those are two key things. On the emotional intelligence side, we're often distracted by our experience. So we might obsess over the particular feeling that we're having. We might be very reactive. And so in that case, we're distracted by the moment. And so, the external world is distracting, but so is the internal one. And so, mindfulness helps us with the external world. And I think emotional intelligence helps with the internal.
Well, that's talking about time management and distraction
And attention management.
and
Yeah.
attention management, right? And then the idea that ultimately, if you are more focused and mindful, that you will be more productive in your academic output.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that if you spend more focused time on something, that you will have a better outcome. And I would say that with, in terms of productivity, that you will be more productive. My favorite anecdote for this is a client I worked with, who was balancing two very demanding roles, a faculty role and a teaching and learning center. And this person came to me for time management, said, I can't get all the things done that I need to get done unless I neglect my family, and I don't want to do that. So we talked about attention management as a possible solution, and talked through what that means and how this person might apply it. And they adopted the set of practices and how to think about attention. We did this experiment for a couple weeks, and we checked in, did it for a couple more. And then in that third cycle, as they were sort of refining what process worked for them, how long their periods of focus could be without getting too tired or opening the door for distraction, they finally said, I had my most productive week ever. I knocked off so many things. And at the end of the day, I got home and I was so tired every day. Like my brain was just exhausted. And I said, yeah, because your brain was focusing very effectively on the things that it needed to do.
That's weird, because I have the opposite experience, that when I'm able to focus really well and not go from task to task, I feel less tired.
Yeah, so this person was definitely not going from task to task, but the effort of maintaining focus was something that they were not used to. And it's like a muscle. I mean, attention and focus are like everything else. The more you use it, the better you get at it. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
So I think we've been talking about productivity as if it's just the obvious thing that we're all striving towards, but there are some people who argue against that. In the book, The Slow Professor, one of the ideas is that we should worry less about, having many outputs and take more time to do slow scholarship. And so what do you think about that, and how does that come up in your coaching?
Yeah, I love it. So when you say more productive, you mean quantity.
Yes.
Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily have reached that conclusion. And one of my Tai Chi teachers would always say, you're doing great, you should practice more. And a lot of us took that to mean, oh my God, we should more hours. What he actually meant was just keep practicing, just practice, keep going kind of thing. And I think that is a very similar problem with productivity. More productive doesn't mean more stuff coming out. That is a capitalism, North American stupid idea, right? More productive might mean less stuff that's better.
Mm.
Right. So I'm not interested in pumping more widgets out. I'm interested in coaching clients who want to do better work. So maybe the better term is better productivity.
I like that.
Yeah,
Mira, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that we conflate quality with quantity, I guess, when
absolutely.
we're thinking about
Yeah.
productivity. We tend to think about it in terms of quantity, and oh, that's a really productive scholar, when we mean maybe prolific, and that word has sort of fallen out of style a little bit. But even
Yeah.
a prolific scholar doesn't mean necessarily a better scholar. It means more publications, more opportunities for, I mean, it depends, I guess, what we're going for. Are we going for a higher H index? Are we going, but you can have a
Right.
high H index because of one article that just got cited and cited and cited and cited.
I think that's one of the interesting things that coaching can provide in particular. It's an opportunity to ask questions about things like that most people, and not just academics, but other industries too, just kind of work over as a baseline assumption. And for me, in coaching and the consulting work I do, it comes up in the question, well, what outcome do you want from that? I remember talking to a lawyer in New York City, wanted to bring me in to his team and talk about emotional intelligence. And I said, well, what's the outcome you want from my engagement with your team? And he said, well, you'll do a workshop. And I said, well, oh, great, yeah, but like, what's the outcome? He said, well, I think for the first 15 minutes, you probably want to talk about this. And I said, no, I know how to do a workshop. Like, I know what I would do. I said, what do you want? What is the thing you want at the end? He said, it doesn't matter. I know you'll do a great job. At that point, maybe 5 years ago, I would have said, oh, okay. But I don't do that anymore. And so what I said was, well, if you go to a restaurant and you tell them to bring me great food and they bring you a great salad, but really you thought you were going to get a great burger, doesn't matter how good that salad is. Like, I need you to tell me what specific outcome you want from my engagement with your team. And that shut him up for about 5 minutes as he kind of thought through what that meant. I think a lot of people approach their professional lives, and certainly I did when I was an academic, without asking that question.
Yeah, that is a really important question. So I would say for me, my desired outcome is producing a lot of creative projects, because for me, that is a meaningful thing. It's something that brings me fulfillment. And so all these things we've been talking about mindfulness and minimizing distraction and concentration, those are, for me, ultimately in service of that.
Yeah.
What about you, Mira?
Well, I think I'm trying to move away from quantity after talking to all of these brilliant coaches, and even trying to see whether quantity has been not serving me in my soul. So yes, productivity in the service of certain outcomes, but then are those outcomes serving my soul? So does that burger serve the person's soul, leaving heart disease aside, whatever? Did that person really want a burger? Did that person think they should have a burger because that's what cool teenagers eat? There's so many questions, I guess, about what really moves us and feeds us, and that's really, I don't think I'll ever find an answer to that, but that's the question I'm going to keep asking.
Good for you. You're on a good mindful path.
Thanks.
I think the thing that mindfulness offers um, is the idea that our current experience can be understood in different ways if we look at it differently. I know one of the things that I say to faculty groups that I work with that connects to our conversation is that they have the most agency over their work of almost any working group in North America. And not usually something they like to hear, right? So they're usually pretty challenged by that. But if you think about what agency is and where you can act, how much control you have over your day-to-day life, then, Mira, for you to be able to say, hey, I think I am going to be less focused on quantity for my work. I mean, that's a perfect expression of how much agency you have. A box packer at Amazon doesn't have that choice, right? Um, but in academia, we generally have quite a lot of agency over our work experience and the kinds of things that come back at us, the karmic cycle of assignments and grading. It's all pretty real. And if people can take time to stop and say, well, what is the outcome I actually want from this? Then they have the space to exercise their agency. And if, like Sarah, they know what their purpose is, like they have a really clear idea of what they want, they can avoid taking on projects that they just shouldn't, that don't align with what they want to do, or that feed their sense of guilt and shame, or whatever, like it's so curious. Such high functioning people who have not stopped to ask purpose-driven questions is pretty interesting. And again, it's not just academics. This is true of senior leaders everywhere. Stephen Covey is very famous for saying, I spent my life climbing the ladder, then realized it was up the wrong wall. These are all questions to ask at some point.
Absolutely. And you're so right that academia involves so much more agency than many other industries. And I think some administrators are trying to change that and have more post tenure review, post full professor review, and maybe that would be good in certain ways. But we're so lucky. I feel that we're so lucky that we have so much autonomy. And you're absolutely right that we should be asking the questions about what we want out of that autonomy.
Yeah, because the curse of the autonomy for a high functioning academic is that we're all super ambitious, we're super driven, and we have very bad boundary setting. So you give someone like that a lot of autonomy, there's some pretty predictable outcomes there.
Oh, that's great. Well, Peter Anderson, everybody in academia should talk to you, should get coaching from you, should attend a workshop from you and learn about meditation, mindfulness, stoicism, emotional intelligence, and all these things we've been talking about. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mira. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you. We really appreciated it.
The Peer Review podcast is produced and hosted by Sarah Bunin-Benor and Mira Sukharov. Talia Ehrenberg is assistant producer and editor. The music is written and performed by the Galactic Ambassadors. Support for this podcast comes from a faculty grant from Hebrew Union College. If you would like to sponsor an episode, you can reach us at peerreview@huc.edu. You can join the conversation on Facebook at Peer Review, Cultivating Creativity and Fulfillment in Academia. Thank you for listening.